I'm a big advocate of public transport. Any suggestion that might shift people away from private cars to public transport is desirable. People have become so used to the idea that we can own a personal car which can take us anywhere at any time. I've done another video exploring this and whether there are alternatives. However, an immediate practical suggestion has been put forward by Greenpeace in relation to the cost of rail travel. They commissioned a report on the UK rail system. The report concludes that the UK current rail fare system is overly complex and that people don't trust that they're getting the cheapest ticket, and this may be putting people off from using the train. Germany, Austria, Hungary, France and Portugal all have been experimenting with a new way of paying for train travel through subscriptions. We're used to subscription models for a growing number of things now, so it's interesting to explore whether this could work for rail travel. So, Greenpeace is proposing a climate card for the UK, a monthly subscription for unlimited public transport travel. They suggest that it should be similar to Germany's successful €49 per month Deutschlandticket, which allows unlimited travel on local trains and buses. This has seen a 28% increase in rail use. From an economic perspective, a UK climate card offers multiple benefits. First, it would provide savings for consumers. A monthly rail season ticket from York to Leeds is £217 and from Wigan to Manchester is £137.50. A £49 monthly subscription would be a very attractive offer and a significant saving. It would be a great help with the cost of living. Second, it would also provide an economic stimulus in terms of the levelling up agenda. Cheaper mobility would likely have a significant impact on employment and productivity. The report suggests launching the scheme in regions outside the overcrowded southeast, focusing first on areas like the north of England. And such an approach could stimulate local economies by making transport more affordable, improving access to jobs, and encouraging mobility across regional boundaries. Increased mobility also helps address regional economic imbalances, which have been a persistent issue in the UK. It finally would be a real policy towards levelling up, which so far has been more about words than action. Third, it would provide environmental and health savings. The Greenpeace report estimates that 40 million car journeys could potentially be eliminated annually by the climate card. This would mean that the UK would see significant reductions in congestion, air pollution and CO2 emissions. This graph shows that national rail is equivalent to the average electric car in terms of its carbon emissions, much less than diesel or hybrid cars. Given that the transition to electric cars is going to take a while, this would be a quick win in terms of progress towards climate targets. These environmental benefits translate into real economic savings in healthcare costs that are associated with pollution-related diseases, and they could also help the UK meet its ambitious climate targets. Cleaner air would further boost productivity by reducing days lost to illness. The reduced number of car journeys also improves congestion for those that have to use cars. It's a win-win. So the economic case for a climate card appears to be strong, but there are some significant challenges in the UK adopting this approach. The most significant is the problem of capacity. The UK's rail network doesn't necessarily have the capacity to absorb a surge in passenger numbers. Unlike other European countries, the UK has an overburdened and underfunded rail infrastructure, especially on its major intercity routes and commuter lines. Many services already operate at or near full capacity, particularly in the southeast of England. Without significant investment in new trains and upgraded tracks, better signalling systems, the introduction of a climate card could actually exacerbate overcrowding, and this could result in delays and lower service quality. So a poorly managed rollout could actually discourage new users and strain the system further. This is why Greenpeace makes the sensible suggestion that the scheme doesn't include the south of England, at least initially. I think that we need a long-term programme to dramatically increase rail capacity in the UK. The cancellation of the northern leg of HS2 is just such a regressive move. We should be talking about HS3, HS4 and beyond. Greenpeace has practical suggestions to help here, I think. For example, in the north of England, where train provision is today often provided by short 2-car or 3-car train sets, the report suggests that train lengthening would be a good approach. Although there may be increased investment required for this also, this is much more affordable than adding new railway lines. We can note that, as in many areas, this is one area of policy where successive UK governments have really dropped the ball. The UK lags behind other European countries that have made substantial long-term investments in dedicated high-speed rail lines. In contrast, the UK has relied on its Victorian-era rail infrastructure for far too long, with relatively modest investments in expansion and modernisation. The UK has fallen so far behind. Spain has 4,300 kilometres of high-speed rail track in operation, with another 1,300 kilometres under construction. The UK has 113 kilometres in operation, with around 200 kilometres under construction. These figures seem quite shocking at face value. But I think we do have to take account of geography in looking at this. Spain has vast landscapes and less dense populations, so it's much easier for Spain to build new rail lines through sparsely populated areas. And the UK, by contrast, is much more densely populated, particularly in urban areas. So acquiring land for new infrastructure is complex and expensive. And there is political opposition to these large infrastructure projects, as seen with HS2. This adds to the difficulty, making it harder for the government to commit to the kind of large-scale investments needed to make a climate card viable. But I don't think this is a reason not to do it. There are ways in which these problems can be overcome. There would also be financial implications for this type of scheme. Greenpeace estimates potential revenue losses of between 45 million to 650 million, depending on the uptake. People that are already travelling by train would now be paying a lot less. But these losses could be offset by increased numbers using public transport. The scheme would require significant government subsidies, particularly in the early years, and there's no guarantee that the additional demand would be enough to cover the costs. But the economic and environmental benefits of this scheme are very significant. I think that such a subsidy would be a really good investment. The introduction of a climate card in the UK offers an exciting vision of simpler, more affordable and more sustainable transport. From an economic standpoint, the potential benefits are really significant, from reducing commuter costs and stimulating regional economies to cutting emissions and improving public health. However, for the climate card to succeed, the UK must address its capacity constraints and historical underinvestment. This requires a long-term plan, something that we don't see very much in government these days. Ultimately, while the climate card could play a vital role in the UK's transition to a greener economy, it must be accompanied by a broader strategy of investment in infrastructure. Ultimately, this will require tax increases to cover the costs, but not on ordinary people. The UK has enough wealth to afford this. As I always say in my videos, I'm a big advocate of some form of tax on super wealth. The UK is behind its European neighbours on this. Let's do something towards catching up, and this could be a really popular policy that has a positive economic impact. Let's hope that this idea from Greenpeace gets some traction. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.